I think as a rule, New Zealand growers are innovative, they're risk takers, they tend to try things and see how they can improve, and there's also a lot of good positive communication that happens around what's working and what's not.
Hello, I am Mike Barley.
And I am Cody Ellingham.
This is the Growing Digital Podcast, where we talk with technology leaders in the primary sector. So today we are joined by Hamish Penny, who is the founder and CEO of CropTide. It's a New Zealand company that has developed a unique sensor that gathers data directly from the plant stem. So CropTide connects these insights with weather data through the CropTide platform to enable growers to make smarter decisions in real time. So Hamish, welcome to the show.
Hi Mike, thanks for having me.
So Hamish, tell us, how did CropTide start? When did this all begin?
It began out of a project I was doing at university, really. Sort of trying to look at electricity in plants, trying to understand what was going on. And I was doing a project trying to kill plants with electricity, with high voltage electric shocks, which is really interesting, and led to the question of how the hell can we measure what's actually going on when we treat them, which sort of led down this tangential path of trying to understand how we could measure plants in general using electricity, and uncovered this opportunity to be able to do that with a technology that was inherently scalable and practical for commercial deployment. We started down the journey. I guess.
So initially you were looking at, was that like weed management, sort of instead of herbicides, you could shock the plant?
Trying to be able to replace herbicides with something that's non-toxic and just a little bit of electrical energy being passed through. Yeah, which is fascinating project.
Well, so I got a lot of questions about that, but just kind of come back to maybe the core mechanism, because I mean that's really interesting. So like you went down this process of exploring weed management with shocking the plants, and then you kind of thought actually this can give us a lot of data on the plant and actually what's going on. So like maybe you could tell us a bit about that mechanism. Maybe people don't fully understand what that means potentially.
In terms of the electrical treatment.
Or in terms of what is the role of electricity in plants? Like how can you use that to understand what's going on?
Yeah, so it's slightly different. So the treatment we're doing with the electric shocks is really high voltage, low energy, really short pulses of energy. And I don't know if it's been fully understood why it seems to kill plants, but it does. I think it does something to the cellular structure and causes the plant to actually senesce and sort of kill itself, which is quite fascinating. But anyway, it was more so we've obviously got this electrical system. We're having to electrically connect to the plant in order to do the treatment. And so after we'd done that treatment, could we then be applying some sort of signals or some sort of electrical analysis to the tissue in order to then understand whether, say, that particular effect had taken place and the plant was going to die. And that's the path we've gone down. So it's called bioimpedance. It's basically putting little low voltage electrical signals through the plant tissue, and the membranes and the sap have particular electrical characteristics that are indicative of physiological state. So whether that be water status or nutrient status or various other things, so essentially the sort of signature of the electrical characteristics of the cells and the sap tell you things about what's happening in the plant that you can use to then make decisions, obviously.
That's fascinating, honestly. Do you have a background in agriculture, or how do you know this stuff?
So, I have a background as an engineer doing mechatronics engineering. So I had obviously the electrical side, the physics, the maths, that side of things, and then came into it and had to learn a lot about plants very quickly. Obviously, how we initially met was through Dan Bloomer's place down the road at Landwise, and obviously he supported the master's project that was doing that electrical weeding, and he's still he did his PhD based largely around that work as well. So he was obviously supportive in helping me bridge that gap to understanding a little bit more about farming and sort of biology and the systems, and helped obviously get the project off the ground.
So with that background, you were able to build and test a hell of a lot of different ways, I guess, of working out what works and what doesn't, and then um, a lot of testing on plants to see what it did.
Yeah, exactly. So we had, I guess the ability to quickly put together prototypes and do things, get things in a greenhouse, and put a whole lot of electrodes on them and play around and do different things, and also access to growers fairly early on that we're keen to sort of try it as well. So very early, like we literally just had the idea, and then a month later we had some sensors out on TNG orchards in Hawke's Bay and a Villa Maria site. They were just keen to. They were obviously interested in seeing what was happening in the plants and keen to support the project. So that was pretty cool to get that happening quite quickly.
Yeah, that's really fast. So as a result of those trials, did things carry on down the same pathway, or did you learn some things and then sort of shoot off in a different tangent?
That's a good question. From a technological standpoint, we definitely changed. The initial hypothesis around the valley we wanted to create was based on that Hawke's Bay had 3 seasons of drought at that stage. So that was 2020, I think. That was sort of the 3rd season of drought in a row. So everyone was very focused on water status. How can we be understanding what's happening around the water status? And obviously for irrigation management, people use soil moisture, but particularly for high value red varieties and wine and just in general, there's a feeling that there's a gap in information from what the soil's telling you and from what the plants are really experiencing. So that was the focus, if we could do that part of it first. And we're starting to see a lot more opportunity in the data around nutrients and around sort of physiological stages and timings of things that are happening, and potentially starting to see some responses around disease as well. So we're starting to sort of expand now into different things and thinking differently around how we approach it. But we've stuck pretty strongly to that problem, and obviously water is a big global issue. It's been something that's supported us in getting funding and continuing down the path.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I see a couple of things here, Hamish. There's the mechanical engineering background, obviously the software as well, and certainly kind of an approach to innovation that you guys seem to be running with, which is pretty cool. But I also see some parallels with the kind of health tech and smartwatches and how people are using a lot more of this stuff in their own personal lives. Just to manage their diet or their life, how many steps they're taking. And it seems like you're kind of thinking about what the plant is actually experiencing as kind of a bit of a paradigm shift in agriculture and growing. So, tell me more about that, at a high level, because this sounds like it's quite a powerful concept to be exploring.
Yeah, it is, I think. For sure, the whole paradigm of historically people are, I guess, largely sort of using tried and true methods and sort of just repeating similar things year after year and following sort of similar patterns when they're making decisions. And I think increasingly, obviously, data sources are becoming more abundant and science is improving. But also the predictability of the environment is decreasing. So obviously and talking to any grower around Hawke's Bay at least, and certainly around the world as well, just every season is becoming so much more variable and less predictable than it was before. And which means obviously you can't just make decisions based on what you've done in the past. You have to be looking at, well, what are the conditions right now that I'm being faced with? And to do that, you obviously have to have data and you have to have science and insight. And I guess that's something that we've been a part of, and we see as something that growers are realizing that they need to move towards. And doesn't mean there aren't challenges and changing that mindset and changing the way that people are approaching things, but the problem and the need is certainly there. And I think, obviously, as you say, the data coming directly from the plant is something we believe is obviously a crucial part of that. And if you're making decisions not just on what do we think might be happening, but what's actually happening and what does the plant actually need, is it actually thirsty or is it actually lacking nutrients? Not just does a whole lot of other data indicate that might be the case. I guess there's an opportunity to be more precise and really deliver what you're trying to achieve, and obviously get environmental wins through not overdoing things as well.
It's an interesting point that you raise around the variability in the seasons and the climate. What I'd add to that, I think, is there's an expectation or a demand for higher quality or less variability in the output of the produce or whatever it happens to be. So the tools that we've used in the past worked well for very similar seasons and not so much variability. But going forward with that, new ways of thinking, new tools, new technology is needed to try and bridge that.
Yeah, I think there's a consumer demand for that. There's also supply chains are so reliant on it as well. And being if you're both, I've heard growers talk about it both ways. So if you end up overestimating yield or different characteristics, or if you end up underestimating, you end up with a problem with having too much market or not enough market for your fruit. So it's quite interesting. Yeah, the variability feeds through the whole sort of system, I guess, and that's where data I think can be a help sort of understand things in advance or try to mitigate some of those effects.
Yeah. You know what's interesting, Hamish? With some of my other work that I do, I'm very interested in the energy sector, and I'm seeing a bit of a parallel. You know, we talk about variability, but with the rollout of more renewable energy, that's created a whole nother problem space for variability in energy generation with solar and wind versus what it used to be like. You know, you just have base load coal or hydro, and sort of applying some of those ways of thinking to what's happening with agriculture, it presents a lot of opportunity for us to explore, the kind of concept of variability and what it means and how we respond to it. And I am curious, like, if you think, or how you think about maybe the different pieces of tech, or maybe the different ideas that have come together for this to all work. Like, is it really that only now we have the ability to do this, or do you think it's more that the situation is demanding it, and so we're doing it?
That's a good question. I think it's a bit of both. Certainly for our technology, it was only really when we just started that the chip that you needed to use to accurately do the measurement we're doing at small scale with small batteries and things like that had been released. So there's obviously a technological element for the specific thing that we're doing, and just in general, there's obviously lots of different technologies that are advancing all the time that make these things easier. But I think, as well as that, there's this whole. I mean, it's partly climate change, and it's partly the markets and the competitiveness, and I guess the consumer awareness and pressure around environmental, I guess, credibility from a grower's standpoint, and wanting that transparency as well, and regulators sort of obviously feeling that and being in the middle and putting pressure back onto growers as well. So for a few of those reasons, you kind of end up with that outcome.
You mentioned data sources and that sort of thing. Hamish, what's the role of kind of weather data in the CropTide space?
Yeah. Well, we've obviously been partnered for a little while with Hort Plus around that. I guess I think actually more broadly, so weather is obviously a crucial part of, it's one of the most variable things. When we talk about climate change, that's how it manifests for a grower is weather, right? So, and then as a result of that weather, you end up with the plant having a particular thing, and then you've got to think about sprays, you've got to think about other management, you've got to think about all of the different things that you're doing on an orchard or a vineyard. And yeah, I think all of those different pieces have to fit together for us. If we can deliver obviously good local weather alongside our plant-based data, it provides context, it provides understanding for people in terms of how they can be making decisions, so that the different things that are important for an irrigation decision, for example, are available to them in sort of one spot. So yeah, I'm sure, everyone that's involved in agri-tech hears all the time the need for data to be shared and for things to be sort of compatible and breaking down those barriers between different sources and repositories of data. So that's where the magic is. And I think, it's obviously been great to be able to access this good quality data from you guys to complement what we've been doing along the way.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I wonder whether you have, Hamish, at a high level, any kind of paradigms or thoughts around the way you approach these things? Because you mentioned that kind of data siloing, and certainly for Hort Plus, one of the ethos that we take is compatibility, and sharing and connecting with people and meeting them where they are at. And I wonder whether this sort of feeds into maybe sort of your business philosophy, the way you like to approach things, and how you build things.
Yeah, it does. I think what we've learned over the period of developing this data set is that you need to make it you need to make data very usable. And I think historically, growers have been burned probably more than they've been happy with the way that data's been provided and the way that they've been able to use it. And I think they would probably tell you that they're not getting the value from data that they could be. I mean, there's obviously good example. I feel like obviously you guys have a great reputation for how you've done it, but I think there are a lot of companies that haven't done a good job. I think, historically growers haven't necessarily got that value. So something we think about a lot is how do we make sure that we're part of that positive shift towards data interoperability and also just providing data in the right place at the right time in the right way, so that it's delivering the value that it can. So yeah, it's a constantly evolving thing, but it's such an important thing when you talk to growers about data and the value that they're getting from it, that you are thinking about that just selling someone data is probably not going to create a lot of value, and there's a lot of nuance and understanding you have to do a good job of that.
Yeah, that's a really, really important step of the process of, having the data at the right time and not just timely data, but at the right time for when the decision is made. So getting the data too late or too early, if you're not making the decision at that time, it's not useful. If it's too late, then there's frustration around that. So timeliness of it is a really big part of that. That's for sure. That's from our experience on our side. Just pulling on that thread you said earlier a little bit, what has the response from growers been, where you've had the tech out and running in their operations?
It's been really positive. I mean, people love the thought of being able to get data from plants, and also there's a lot of people that have had and have strong environmental focus in terms of what they're doing. We've certainly found that, and something that we're currently working on solving, is we have a layer of the organizations that are seeing value from the data, which are more technical people within the organization that have more capacity and experience dealing with data and seeing value from data, and trying to find out or think about how we can translate value down into the sort of day-to-day operations and into people that might not have as much technical expertise in that space. I think that's been sort of the story for us, is trying to understand how we can make sure that we're delivering value throughout the organization. And yeah, we're kind of working on that at the moment, and hopefully we'll be able to put something out around the next steps we're doing with that pretty soon, which will be cool. But yeah, it's an interesting challenge, but it's very rewarding as well.
Oh, cool, man! That sounds exciting. I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. It is an interesting concept that we record things about the plant, but we don't actually record from the plant. We'll do measurements of fruit and that sort of thing, but there's not really any sensors or systems for general practice or general farming or horticulture where the plant is being measurements from the plant are being taken. So, we'll measure the soil, we'll measure the weather and everything around it, but not it exactly. So I think this is a really cool link, to provide a data source that hasn't been available before.
Yeah, I think hopefully it unlocks a whole lot of value around it as well. It's not just the value of getting the data from the plant itself, but it's the way it links to everything else around it. Right, to your point, like it's maybe a node in the system that's sort of been missed out in the past, and by sort of connecting that dot, it can link a whole lot of other things together and potentially provide a bit more understanding of causality, like what's actually causing what throughout the system, and sort of feeds back into improved decision making and understanding and prediction and things like that as well. So yeah, I feel like it's been an underutilized. I mean, maybe the technology hasn't really been available, but yeah, an underutilized sort of data source in the past.
Yeah, well, that's fascinating because even the classic disease triangle, in a sense, the phenology side, the growth stages and that, it's still sort of like, well, are we at bud break or are we at this stage, and it's kind of, kind of guessing or, I mean, it is accurate, but you're looking
There's
at
variability.
it, you're not measuring it necessarily. And so this is maybe a new approach to that, which is really fascinating. And it also, I mean, you've got, bricks measurements and all sorts of things that are taken, but those are still, kind of looking at it. It's not actually what the plant's maybe experiencing. And I think this opens up a whole new space of the data, or that kind of experience of the plant as a data source. And I kind of understand what you're saying, though, Hamish. There's this extension challenge of communicating this through to the people who are actually out there doing the work. And I wonder, I mean, you said you're going to release some more on this in the future, but I guess as a general concept, I mean, where do you see New Zealand at in terms of the growers who are data focused, who are looking at this kind of technology? Like, are you seeing an increase in that? Are you seeing people embrace it? Like those who do take it up, who are sort of really embracing this as the future, or?
Well, I mean, obviously the interesting broader context of that is the state of some of these industries. So I guess kiwi fruit in particular has done well in the last couple of years, but for wine and apples, it's some of the hardest years they've had in a fair while at the in recent times, and that has a massive impact, obviously, on the psychology and the way that people are thinking about tech adoption and thinking about doing these things. In some ways, it drives efficiency and it drives people wanting to find ways or find things that can help them that deliver a financial ROI so that they can cut their costs or increase revenue a bit or whatever it is. But it does sort of take away from some other things. So I think that's important when you think about what New Zealand growers are looking at, is they're invariably at the moment looking at things that will make them a little bit more money or keep their margins to whatever they can keep them to, particularly in the wine and apples, I guess. And yeah, I guess globally, similar situation, particularly in the wine industry. The whole global industry is in a bit of a downturn. But compare it, so we've got sensors up in the US and we've been doing work in Europe, and sensors up there as well. And yeah, I guess I think New Zealand's ahead of the curve in terms of particularly fascinating going up to California and talking to the growers and being there and so close to obviously the global tech hub of Silicon Valley, and yet a lot of those growers are definitely a fair way behind what a lot of growers in New Zealand are doing, and probably similar in Europe. It's somewhere in the middle, probably over there. But I think as a rule, New Zealand growers are innovative. They're risk takers. They tend to try things and see how they can improve. And there's also a lot of good positive communication that happens around what's working and what's not. So yeah, I think that's probably how I would say it.
That's fascinating. I mean, my understanding of that dynamic, Hamish, is that obviously New Zealand's far away from the world, labour is expensive, and so there's kind of this reliance maybe in Europe and the US on cheaper labour basically to solve problems and throw people at the problem, whereas New Zealand, we have to fly people in or be more smart with the way we use tech, and so it's certainly a different dynamic that maybe fosters technology to come out of New Zealand. So there's a real opportunity, but I guess that's my next question I wanted to ask you about is the pathway for growth, because we often hear these stories of New Zealand tech companies that make it, and then there's also a whole lot who kind of just stay as domestic providers. And I mean, what's your approach to growing CropTide? Are you sort of New Zealand first and then from there, or are you looking at a global market ultimately? Where do you see the sort of the trajectory?
Yeah, we're from the outset designed ourselves and thought of ourselves as a global company. We've obviously set up those sort of demos or sensor installations in Europe and the US in 2022, which is amazing to think now. But yeah, I think the problem is that we're trying to solve is a global one, particularly around water, but more generally around helping growers to unlock the value of data and how the plant insights can be a key part of that. But yeah, it always makes sense to try to do a great job in your backyard first. So I think it's about both. It's about trying to do a great job, and where you're physically on the ground and you've got the most knowledge and experience, and then it's that sort of strategy to unlock value offshore. And the reality is, like, you do have to be a little bit more unique and competitive offshore because there's just more people, especially in the US. There's endless competitors and different people that are doing things. So that's a different challenge, but it's exciting to I think we're doing something quite unique that translates well in those global markets.
It's you speak of challenges, and no doubt in a much larger market there's a lot more players, but as a result of that, there's also a lot more customers as well. So it can go both ways, which is the exciting part.
Yeah.
What other kind of challenges have you faced with that sort of approach?
Well, with trying to do international stuff in particular, it's been trying to deal with things on the other side of the world. It's obviously, you can imagine, got its challenges. Very first time I went over to install, which was pretty early. We had pretty early sensing technology at the time, doing our first installations in the US and Europe. And it was just after COVID had opened up the borders, so arrived in the US and then managed to get COVID. We only had 5 days to install both a site in California and a site up in Washington, and ended up sort of lucky in a way because we ended up with an issue with the local regional LoRa network, the communications network we were using. So I managed, because I was stuck in a hotel for 3 days, I managed to fix the bug and worked out okay. But pretty crazy little adventure to have gone on at that time. And then that's just a funny story. But it's obviously always sort of different challenges just in doing things in different regions, and then obviously languages as well is an interesting one. We've been fortunate to have a few people on the team that are fluent in a couple of those languages, so that's helped. But it's interesting. It's cool. Obviously, in those different local areas, there's so many unique challenges and so many similarities and so many cool things, and also just growers anywhere in the world, I think, are pretty good people who are pretty keen to sort of get out for a dinner and chat and, pretty down to earth. So that part of it's pretty awesome as well.
Have you noticed in terms of the business process and the way, say, New Zealand business culture works versus, say, the US, what have your learnings or takeaways been from that?
That is an interesting one. Definitely. It's different. So we've got an investor. One of our last capital raise, we had an investor from Silicon Valley come on board, and so being a part around that and being around other companies, part of that portfolio, is really interesting. And certainly, it's like there's so much knowledge built up, obviously, in that part of the world that you're able to tap into. But also, people who are obviously a lot more direct and a lot more sort of aggressive in certain ways, and which is a good thing to be around as well. But cool to see. And then on the flip side, in terms of agriculture in the US, people are just, my experience is people are very traditional. They really value the sort of family values and tradition, and I think that feeds into that difference as well, and between sort of broader California and Silicon Valley. That part of it's really fascinating and cool. I mean, it makes sense, and you want to fit into the way that people think, and you don't want to you want to support their sort of culture around that.
Well, it's good to meet people where they're at, and I certainly think, New Zealand, it is kind of a small market. It's, everyone kind of knows everyone really, and it's I think it's a really ripe place for innovation to happen, but it's also a very small market in terms of capital, right? And you mentioned you had secured some investment for CropTide from Silicon Valley, and you've also, I believe, had some top New Zealand investors come on board. But I'd be keen to learn more about that process. What was that the first time you've gone through the capital raising process? What did you learn along the way? How did that all play out for you?
Yeah, learned a lot along the way. We we started the business, as I said, I think late 2020, um, and then met Robbie Paul from Icehouse Ventures, who's for a coffee in Havelock North pretty early after that, who was excited about the idea and kind of just kept in touch for a little while we were working away at the proof of concept and getting some initial partners, companies to support the project. And then did a showcase. They have an annual showcase they do, which is it was ended up being online because of COVID, but yeah, had I guess 1,000 investors or whatever in their network on that, and then out of that raised $1 million, which was kind of less than 12 months old, and not having any really knowledge or experience around capital raising or even really having understood what we were doing in many ways, except the technology side. So that was pretty cool, and a rapid introduction to a whole lot of things. Obviously, big advantages to getting capital. There's downsides. There's different ways people do it. But yeah, being able to tap into some of the expertise is probably the biggest thing. And then yeah, going to the sort of US side is another step up, another notch up in intensity again, and learnings and challenges and things. So yeah, quite interesting
Yeah.
process to kind of go through.
And so you mentioned Icehouse, was it Robbie Paul?
Yeah.
Yeah. So along the way, I guess, as a young business, I mean, were you able to seek out mentorship or leadership in terms of how to approach these things? Because it's not necessarily the kind of thing that you can just, Google an answer to in terms of the cap table and the ways to approach the raise. Like you had some help or some mentorship along the way that brought you to where you are today.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm fortunate. My dad didn't raise capital, but he did build a company and is a technology company, and kind of has been through some of these things. So that was early on. That was pretty helpful. And then once we'd done the sort of first raise and we had Icehouse on board, I guess they helped with connecting to a few different advisors. We've been fortunate to have some pretty incredible people as advisors along the way that are still advisors as well. So yeah, I think we've done pretty well from that perspective. And I mean, it's so important. And even other founders, it's quite a positive culture in New Zealand around startups. Like everyone wants to help each other, and it's sort of a pass it on thing. Like this, I got a lot of support early on, and I've been fortunate with a couple of different companies to be able to help them with a couple of things. So I think that's part of it, and it's an advantage of being in New Zealand because it's a lot less cutthroat, I guess, than Silicon Valley in that way, and where people want to be collaborative and they want to help. Although that is the case in Silicon Valley as well, but yeah, just I guess the Kiwi side comes in, which is pretty cool.
That's cool, man. It's it really sounds like quite a journey that you've gone through, and I think every time we catch up, you've got another story around a big lesson, or you've some endeavour or whatnot that you've taken off on and succeed every time. It's fantastic. Just so over time, would you say 2020-ish when things sort of kicked off, you've grown, the company's grown and that sort of thing. So yeah, can you tell us a bit more about your team and who's how many have you got involved now?
We've got 9 on the team at the moment. Yeah, we've been fortunate to have some amazing people join the team. Yeah, some fast, I mean, it's one of the most rewarding things, obviously, about building a company is getting to work with amazing people. Sometimes it doesn't work out, sometimes it does, but yeah, I mean, some pretty incredible people on the team. Yeah, at the moment for sure. And yeah, I don't know.
It's all good. Yeah, working with good people makes a big difference.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've been fortunate as well. Obviously, Hort Plus and CropTide working together in the data, with the data space and have collaboration there. And it's certainly been awesome to be part of that. And again, like kind of because you're from Hawke's Bay, Hamish. I don't know if I asked. Yeah, so we've got this kind of common thread. I mean, I'm from Hastings as well, and it's like going to the world with this kind of homegrown New Zealand tech. It's kind of cool, right? To have a good team behind that as well.
It is, yeah. And it's cool to like have been able to do some trips overseas as well with obviously people on the team along the way. I mean, that's pretty awesome. Getting to go around these different places and as you say, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Well, looking towards the rest of 2025, and you've got a lot of stuff happening, but I mean, could you give us a bit of an idea of what's on your horizon? What's the roadmap for this year? Where's CropTide heading?
Where's CropTide heading? I mean, as I say, we're sort of looking to put some news out soon around a new thing that we're doing to try to deal with that delivering value from data piece and making sure that it's really accessible for people. Obviously, trying to do a great job of that. Like we feel that we obviously have a group of customers that are getting a whole lot of value out of our data, but we want to see that really expand and feel like we're working for the whole system. So that's the objective, and then look to translate that into offshore regions as well. Once we feel that we've really got that functioning well here in New Zealand, and we've also we continue to sort of develop and improve the sensing technology constantly as well. So expanding beyond water status into some of these other things and continuing to develop the science behind it. And hopefully we'll end up publishing a paper before too long with some stuff as well. It'd be quite cool. That's all part of the plans.
Yeah. And I guess longer range as well, is there anything else you're seeing emerge in New Zealand or globally that is really complementary to the trajectory that you're on? Any technology or ideas that you're following closely?
That's a good question. Nothing in particular. I think there's some interesting things I do see out there. So there's a company in South America that's taken a completely different approach to the problem of water efficiency. So basically looking at selling the water savings onto corporates like Microsoft that have water efficiency goals. So completely flipping their business model. I think that's fascinating to watch. Like obviously farmers, growers, the whole community benefits from them using less water, but they don't necessarily economically benefit. So understanding how that can sort of evolve into a slightly different business model, that's really cool.
Water credits, is it?
Kind of. I can find the name, but that's one of the cooler ones that I've seen. But there's always interesting things that are popping up that I try to keep an eye on.
Yeah. Awesome. And I guess, I mean, the other one that stands out to me, I would be interested to know your thoughts on artificial intelligence, AI, data analysis, and kind of layers over what your guys are reading off these plants. So is that something that feeds into what you're doing?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think to the question or to the conversation earlier around the fact that growers have these problems with different systems being in different places. Like one of the key things that's happening with AI is it's got a lot of both in itself and also some of the supporting technologies make it a lot easier to break down those barriers. So that's obviously part of what we're sort of looking to move towards. But I think in general that whole system is starting to create this paradigm shift of breaking down the barriers and unlocking more value. The AI thing is a really interesting one. It's going to be interesting how it plays out. But in particular, the thing I'm focused on, I guess, is on how do you break down that sort of data barrier problem. Yeah.
Anything in the telemetry space that would change things?
Yeah, I guess there's the potential for more satellite-based communication, which would make a difference for us. So we have to currently set up a LoRa base station wherever we deploy sensors. So it's another piece of infrastructure, another thing that gets in the way of tractors or whatever. I mean, we'd avoid it. But it's just another thing to be out there on the farm, and I think the satellite-based stuff's pretty exciting if you can obviously not be reliant on cellular reception and things like that as well, and you can just beam things up. So that's been a technology we've kind of been watching, and pretty convenient as well for an environment like an orchard or vineyard where you've got potentially a lot of interference horizontally but not much interference vertically, especially if you're low down on the plant. So from that perspective, that's got a lot of potential for us. But yeah, it needs to kind of get to a point obviously where it becomes viable as an alternative, which it hasn't yet.
Yeah.
Sorry, one more question just on the actual business side of this. So I guess with say a vineyard, I mean, how many sensors are we talking here? Is this something that you see growing in density, or like, can you give us maybe some ballpark for people who haven't maybe used this kind of thing before, of like how much is out there? Yeah.
So we basically look at the variability within the operation. So if you've got a very variable soil, or you've got different climatic zones, or you've got different just any variable that changes throughout the operation, and you want to measure, then you can put sensors out. So we put a cluster of sensors, we call it, which is 3 sensors, to be representative of a particular zone within the orchard or vineyard, and 3 sensors so that you've got confidence you are accurately measuring that. It's just not just a unique plant that's doing something different. And then you can kind of see within those different zones what's happening, and if for the grower, if they're targeting higher precision, then they might bias towards more like smaller zones and more sensors, or vice versa. If they're comfortable that they're going to have a pretty broad stroked management approach, then they can do that, and obviously the pricing can kind of scale naturally with that. It depends, but it could be up to sort of a cluster per hectare, it could be 10 hectares, or it really depends on the
Okay, and I'm really interested that initial piece, identifying the variability. If you can talk to that, like what does that entail? Because I mean, that's certainly an issue in New Zealand. You've got microclimates and that, but is there sort of a pre-installation process you go through? Is there sort of a formula you have for helping the grower, or sort of understanding what the grower's challenges are there? Like, what's that entail?
So there's a couple of things we do. If they've done soil mapping, that is by far the best thing. Yeah. Obviously, soil is the main thing that you'd be looking at around variability. So if they've got that, then we can access it and look at the zones based on the soil maps. And obviously, if you've got different varieties as well, that changes things. But that's the best thing. If they haven't got that, then we generally fall back to satellite-based data, just looking at NDVI data, sort of rolling back to previous seasons when it might have got a bit dry or whatever, and look at where the zones started to appear in terms of the vigor within the orchard or vineyard, which is and then obviously just talking to the grower as well. They're usually pretty aware of generally where the variability sits, and you can kind of cross-reference it to come to a decision around where those sensors should be deployed.
Sweet. Oh, that's interesting. It's approaching that would be, I can understand the challenges around that. So, and soils being, as you say, one of the critical inputs there. And good idea using the NDV data, and that satellite imagery would come in handy, because there will be a lot of history there as well.
Yeah, a lot of history, and it's just so readily available. Like, it's obviously very easy to access, and it's not as anywhere near as precise as soil mapping and really understanding what's happening. Obviously, grapevines, you've got a vertical canopy and you've got grass, so really the NDVI is mostly looking at the grass, but and not necessarily the roots zone that the plants are accessing. But still, it's a pretty good idea of what's happening throughout that orchard or vineyard.
Sweet, man. Well, look, thanks so much for sharing your story and chatting with us. It's really exciting stuff to hear. And I'd love to talk more, but we'll we can do that offline. So, where can people learn more about CropTide? Where do you want us to? Where do you want to send people to?
Oh, the best thing is just croptide.com, the website, obviously, or just search CropTide on LinkedIn. put stuff up. So yeah, they're the best places to see what's happening.
Cool. All right. Thank you very much, Hamish.
Yeah, thanks, Cody and Mike. Appreciate it.
Cheers, mate.